Good morning. Thank you for being here today. I really don't consider myself an expert in accessibility, primarily because what I know is things that I have had to go out and learn and explore and investigate. I don't have any lived experience of requiring additional accessibility tools or any additional technology to help me. So I think that the best way of dealing with accessibility is actually to talk to other people and find out their lived experience and sort of move that and kind of introduce that into my work. So I can only say that COVID was probably really great for all of you guys, because if I had stood in front of you and given the same talk or attempted to do this talk a couple of years ago, it would have been quite different, because my journey with accessibility has grown and developed so much in a couple of years that there's just so much more to talk about. And I also don't want to stand up here at the front and be like, okay, I'm going to tell you all a whole bunch of stuff that I think is really important. That's just not really how I roll. You've all come along looking for different information, needing different information, being interested in different things. So please, at any point when I'm talking, if you have a question, if you do not understand what I just said, if you want more clarity, stick your hand up. Stick your hand up and share. Hi. Go for it.
This is just a comment. Bev, you have lived experience of needing glasses to improve your eyesight to the same level. So that thing of like whether we have lived experience of needing assistance, it may be temporarily able-bodied now, by the time we're older we definitely need it. But we don't know what we don't know until we think about it.
This is true, very true. And there is things that, you know, when your glasses work so well, you take that for granted and you just kind of roll with it, right? So I don't consider myself in any way disabled, but if I take my glasses off, I can't drive home. So that's probably fairly significant. So yeah, if you have any questions, if you want to sort of chime in, if you've got an anecdote, if you've got an experience that you'd like to share, please feel free to stick your hand up and do that, because I think that's where the value in these kinds of events are, because we are all stronger when we work together. So here's hoping that the technology works for me. I kind of wanted to throw my first question out to you as an audience. You know, what does accessibility mean for you? What are you here for today? What do you want to know about? Yeah, anyone? Anyone feeling brave enough to stick up a hand? No?
I always stick up my hand. I know a bit about accessibility, right? But part of that is because I have a lot of friends who are disabled. So for me, I come to sessions like this to learn just another tip, another tool, another trick, so that I can help other people get access to information that they might have difficulty sort of understanding or finding because of barriers that exist.
And I think you've raised an awesome point, because accessibility isn't just one thing. It's not just being able to use the web easily. It's not just, being able to wear your glasses and drive yourself home. It's about our built environment. It's about the streets that we walk in. And there is just so many avenues that you can explore. And that's, for me, what makes accessibility so exciting. My organisation actually had a massive change of shift when it came to accessibility because of COVID, because up until that point they had been thinking of accessibility as an issue that affected certain groups of people. And then we all went into lockdown and none of us had the technology to be able to do our jobs. And I was like, excuse me, that's an accessibility issue. If we don't have the tools to do what we take for granted, it's instantly, we notice it. When you're able-bodied, when you're not used to having a struggle, you notice it instantly, and suddenly you've got, motivation to fight that. But trying to fight it on behalf of a group of people that you don't know their lived experience, and you don't have any examples that you can fall back on, it's a bit trickier. So that's why sharing and talking about it is just so valuable. I found this first little phrase on the internet. So it means that accessibility means that people can do what they need to do in a similar amount of time and effort to someone that does not have special requirements. And I think that pretty much sums it up. But for me, words like equity and everybody and everywhere and community, inclusion is an accessibility word. And I'm actually really keen on that. Volunteer Wellington, sign me up. I'm coming to your inclusion event, because it's the same thing. And it's things that we need to really be thinking about every day. So I'm going to talk about a lot of things that I use in my business. I'm hoping that if you've got questions and you want some information on what you would need to use in your business, you can stick up your hand and ask. Everything I talk about here I'm going to be providing in a resource pack at the end, so if you struggle to follow the slides, if you would rather have a bit more time to read them, they will all be provided to you. The list of websites and tools that I use will all be provided to you. This is being recorded, so you can also have that recording, and feel free to share it with everyone. There is no protection on this. Share it wide and talk about it lots. I just noticed that my computer is not, oh, it is making a noise. Right, I'm just going to turn that up. So the misconceptions about accessibility is that, and this is what I hear from my organisation quite a bit, it's really difficult and complicated. It's really hard. And it requires specialist knowledge. We need to get some experts in to do this, and we need to pay people lots and lots of money to come in and give us all their really, well-researched advice. And that's going to be expensive. So these are all the reasons why we can't do it. And, maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe the world we're living in today is a little bit too PC, and everybody needs to sort of just chill out a bit. And, we're smart people, and we build good tools, and they work. Sort of. And I think that's kind of very broken and kind of the wrong attitude, because it really does matter. And these are a few little reasons as to why they matter. At any one time in New Zealand, we have about 25% of people who identify as being disabled. And that doesn't mean the mum with 2 big bags of shopping and a toddler and a buggy who's trying to find her keys in the bottom of her handbag. She doesn't probably register here. And me, with my glasses that I didn't even think about, I probably don't register here. So that number is considerably greater than that percentage. Minority groups make up well over half of the population of New Zealand. So these are people who do not have access to the internet. They do not have English as their native language. They maybe have a disability. That's 2.2 million people. Is that a group that doesn't matter to your organisation? Because I think I work for a government organisation, and for my government organisation to turn around and go 2.2 million people don't matter is incredibly short-sighted. And it's something we need to change, and we really only get there when people start asking for it. Now, I can give you a whole bunch of technical information about accessibility. I'm passionate about this, and I can talk about it all day. It's also potentially quite dry, relatively boring, and not relevant to a lot of people. But the 4 main principles of accessibility are that whatever product or process that you're creating, it needs to be perceivable, and that literally means that a user can see what they need on a page. And it needs to be operable, and that means that a user can do what they need to do with your document. And it needs to be understandable, and they can achieve what they need to by looking at the information that you've provided, and it needs to be robust. So it doesn't break when somebody needs to use a screen reader, or they need to zoom in on their web page because their glasses require an additional magnification.
Just a quick word there, Bev. I was talking with somebody beforehand who was saying that they weren't familiar with screen readers, and for anybody in the room, it's like if you're blind, you have software that reads the text on the page out loud to people. So if you send somebody an image file, really lovely poster but with no text, and they're blind, they won't get any sense out of it. So just that thing of when people can see what's there, well actually some of it, the people can hear what's there.
And that's why, to be truly accessible, you need to kind of tackle all of those, because sending an image is not a particularly robust solution for some people. It's broken when somebody tries to use it in a different way. I'll talk a little bit about screen readers and how they work later. So in New Zealand, currently we kind of tend to work towards a particular set of guidelines, and these come from an organisation in America called the W3C. And these are a bunch of very, very intelligent, probably geeky males who have sat somewhere in their offices and created a bunch of rules for the internet. And this is how the internet is created. And most web developers follow guidelines and instructions from W3C when it comes to creating websites. It stands for the World Wide Web Consortium. And they have created WCAG guides, and that is the Web Content Accessibility Guides. Up until very, very recently, we've all been working towards 2.1. And 2.1 breaks a bunch of different criteria into 3 categories. You've got AAA, A, and A. The easiest ones to attain are A, and the hardest are the AAAs. In June of this year, they updated it to WCAG 2.2, and they introduced 9 new criteria and promoted one to a higher category. Again, I can give you all of this information if anyone is interested, but they're very specific individual criteria for certain elements on a website. And next year, they're bringing out 3. Now, 3 is really exciting because the aim of 3 is to provide a little bit more instruction around how to achieve these things. Currently, there's a bunch of criteria and it says, you must do this, you must have this, you must achieve this thing. But it doesn't really tell you how to do those. It doesn't give you ideas or options of things that you can attempt or try on your websites to make them work. So next year, I'm really excited to see what they're going to come out with, because in theory, it should make these development of these solutions a little bit easier for everyone, because it's going to provide ways to achieve them.
Excuse me, could I ask you, are those guidelines and instructions all I see people having? Is that it's with technical issues around some aspect of using the internet, but there are no manuals. All of the instructions of how to are on the internet, and even for a pretty web-savvy person like me, I often get up and I have to get a technical expert to help. So you don't need to answer it, but I'm just wondering if it's something others are having trouble with.
No, absolutely. And I'm someone who kind of plays in this space day in and day out, and sometimes I need to just pick up the phone and call a friend because I'm looking for a particular piece of information and I just can't find it. Because it is all on the internet, but there is so much of it. And it's sometimes written in a really dry way that's not particularly accessible, ironically, and difficult to kind of get into and understand and break it down in a way that's meaningful for you. There is a couple of quick reference guides and quick reference sheets that I can provide at the end of the talk that will kind of list it all for you. Yes, I will share it with the entire organisation. We'll put together.
Another suggestion. WCAG 2.1 is the standard for government agencies. So there is a complete web standards, how to do accessibility guide on their website. But in addition to that, there are free web standard how to do it clinics run by Jason Kiss every fortnight that anybody, doesn't need to be a government employee, but anybody can go to.
Jason's the friend I phone.
Yeah. That is, I mean, because I have a dodgy memory, I Google Web Toolkit, which is the earlier version. It doesn't exist anymore, and it takes me to the right page on data.gov.nz. And again, these are something that can be shared, but it's like there are in-person sessions that can share those things. But like as Bev says, there's so much, you know.
And part of the reason that Jason's running these clinics is because there's a mandate in New Zealand as of July 2019 that all government websites need to be accessible. And as of July 2019, they all need to provide information as to how they are improving their services to increase the usage for everyone. And so I think there is I'm trying to remember what it's called. There's a piece of paper that we've all signed and we've agreed to a code of conduct that says we're going to start improving incrementally the sites that we've got, and we're looking for any feedback on, feel free to call my organisation and let them know if there's something broken or something that doesn't work for you, because that's going to make my life really easy when I ask them for their data. But yeah, we've got a call centre who will happily receive any of that information so that we can improve our systems for everyone. So here are some of my go-to tools and tips. I didn't want this talk to be just about kind of web products, because I'm very aware that, as I said at the beginning, accessibility isn't just how to use the website. It's your built environment. It's having the right signage so that you know where to come to your events that you're attending. And printed documentation is something that most people, whatever your skill level and whatever your organisation, you are creating these things and you can make changes tomorrow that will potentially make it easier for people to access those products. And I mean, some of these things they seem really, really obvious, but just reminding people why they are so important. I have senior managers in my organisation who recently signed off a poster that was going to go up in our internally with the text was 10-point text on a poster that they expected people to read while they were waiting for the lift. And I was just like, come on, it's not hard. So the size of your text and the level of your language is really, really important. Making it readable for everyone and grouping things together. Again, I had a junior designer who created another piece of artwork, which I kind of understand where she was going. It looked very pretty, but the titles for everything were at the bottom of the page because of a graphic choice she made, which was lovely, but it made no sense. Yes?
Just another thing that's a real problem is graphic design, where you get light text that's unreadable because of the colours they choose. So the Fringe Festival, who are wonderful, but their program came out and they had this text in yellow on white. And you couldn't read it. It was just impossible. So
Yeah. My company's brand colours are yellow, grey and black. So we have a lot of yellow on white. And it's absolutely terrible. And in fact, the funny thing is our brand guidelines actually state that we shouldn't be using yellow on white. And yet it sneaks through because designers have some creative license sometimes to make these changes. And
they don't actually really.
they shouldn't. Somebody should be gatekeeping this.
Yeah.
It's the same with Skype. Everything in Skype is blue and white.
Yes.
And my father at 91 with glaucoma and cataracts and God knows, it's just a blur and you can't, I'm sort of trying to help him to sort of say, you need to find the cursor and you need to do this, and it's all the wrong side. And with the colour, you just can't see the white image on the blue background.
Absolutely. And the fun part with colour is that there are so many different types of visual disability that different colours work better for different people. So in a perfect world, maybe some of this stuff involves creating one or two different copies, different versions, so that people with a certain type of colour blindness or somebody who needs the text to be slightly bigger actually can consume the content that you're creating. You may have noticed that when my slides change, there's a funny little ding noise. That's something that's so easy to add in on all of your presentations and PowerPoint slides and things like that. And that just helps anyone that has a slightly low level of vision to know that the slide has changed and transitioned into something else. And it means that they know to sort of pay attention, look up, double check, there's been a change. And it's things like that that we just don't think about, but a tiny change for us can make a massive difference for the people that we're presenting to. Now, being a government organisation, we are a Microsoft shop, so we don't actually get a whole lot of choice in which tools we have to use, and the one that we get given to us is the Microsoft suite. And I have a background as being a designer, and I really hate Microsoft tools because they're so restrictive.
They're also non-compliant with the Privacy Act, because if you send out a mass email for an event, you're required not to BCC people, and that means that you're sharing hundreds of emails with people who are not sort of entitled to get them.
And that comment is above my pay grade. I
I
don't know anything.
You know, it's like...
Awesome.
Anyway, just sort of, when you're looking at Microsoft tools, sometimes you might need to sort of test if there's other things that you might...
Yeah, absolutely. So there's the suite, generally I think people in their daily jobs use the Word toolkit and the PowerPoint toolkit the most. And so I've got a little video. I'm really hoping it's going to work well. I don't know if the recording will pick it up, but it will also be provided at the end. So if you have any problems listening to it, we'll provide that for you. And please forgive my voice in this. I was trying to sound like professional and like I knew what I was doing, but I realized that when you speak to me in person, I'm kind of a lot more animated, so I kind of sound like I'm half asleep in these videos, and I apologize for that in advance. Oh, and it's decided.
Office 365 has a number of accessibility tools built in to help with your requirements. For example, under the Home menu, there's a dictate function. This will allow you to turn speech into text. Under View menu, you'll find the Check Accessibility function. This will check your document against a number of guides to ensure your meeting requirements. Here you can see that with my photo, I've missed the alternative text required. I can add it in, save this information, and when I rerun this check, it will now pass. Finally, under the view, there's the immersive reader.
Accessibility example. This will allow you to turn speech into text.
All of these functions help with accessibility requirements for different users and their different needs, and helps you create documents that meet the needs of your users.
Of your users, of your users, of your users.
Do you know if that has a New Zealand specific
It does not.
understanding? Right.
Australia is the closest it gets.
Right, because I was thinking, often they will write algorithm correctly, but whakapapa won't be.
Yep, it is not quite there yet, but these are really great steps forward. And I know, as someone who holds a lot of workshops and conferences, when I've got a bunch of post-it notes that I have to type up, it'll take me about 3 weeks. But using the speech-to-text function, it now takes me about 20 minutes, which is a problem because my boss keeps finding more work for me to do now. But they're really awesome tools, and that's, yep.
Just a small comment. I don't know if you mean, but I couldn't hear clearly captions.
Yes.
And I didn't know whether that video actually had any closed captions on it.
That one doesn't, but I will provide them.
Thank you.
Sorry. I'm sure Microsoft has more tools than that. I was using those ones because I know that they're the ones that a lot of people can use and adapt for their daily tasks that they need to do. And I've got workarounds for about half dozen different things that I need to do because Microsoft in the past haven't provided options for accessibility. I've recently found out that one of their next updates, all of these accessibility functions are going to be turned on by default, which is really awesome because then more people will become aware that they're actually there instead of being hidden 3 menus deep somewhere in the back.
And then it's a challenge of turning off which ones you don't need because you're on a Microsoft Teams call and the caption's going and the chat's going and you can't see anything. Making it really easy to turn things on and off is another accessibility feature. It is.
And actually when it comes to captions, I think the default recommended guide is to have them turned off and then so that your user, if they need them, can turn them on, because for different groups, having speech and text at the same time can also be a distraction and make it much harder for them to read that information. So I apologise that I did not consider that.
We couldn't give control to the end user.
Yeah.
We had to do it from the host, and it was really annoying because then people couldn't actually get what they wanted.
I believe there's a big conversation around accessibility and improving these tools at Microsoft at the minute. It's something that's kind of at the forefront of their mind. We turned captions on for a Zoom meeting, for a Microsoft Teams meeting actually yesterday, and it was hilarious some of the things it was coming up with because of the New Zealand accent. There was some very strange things that they thought we were discussing about on the terrace. But yeah, hopefully these tools will get better the more people use them and the more we integrate them. Because this is the thing, is that with so many of these tools, they're not tools that make it better for a select group of people. They're tools that make it better for everyone. And anyone ever who has sat in the office and watched a YouTube video that they probably shouldn't have been watching, and instead of turning the sound on, turned on the closed captions, knows what I mean. And I'm looking at all of you. So yeah, these things benefit everyone, and that's why it's so important that it becomes just a part of the conversation, the part of the kind of the process that we just do daily and think about these things. So
it's even really funny, if you have Google Chrome as your browser, it now captions videos automatically. So you can be having 3 sets of captions and they don't actually match up.
That sounds like
which of the captions is best?
a whole nother fun challenge right there. Talking about capturing different people, something I believe is coming with Office 365 is some facial recognition software that's built in for your Teams meetings, so that if you're in a room, it will identify it will take a scan of different faces, and it will identify when the voice or the comment is coming from different people. So it's easier to create a transcript based off different people commenting. Whether or not that's a function you want to turn on is another question entirely. That's, again, somewhere in the tech sphere above my pay grade to have that conversation. But moving on to social media, I think everyone probably uses social media even for their own personal enjoyment, as well as for their work and kind of requirements in the office. So I've got another video, and I apologize, this one does not have captions as well.
When creating a post on Facebook social media, the option to add alt text is available when you put in an image. So as you can see here with my post, I've given it a title, I've added the image, and now if I edit this photo, I have the option to add alt text. Now when I post this, anyone using a screen reader will be able to access the content. Other things that you can do using Facebook is allow captions on any of your videos that you create. If you're doing a Facebook live stream, you can ensure that you upload the video later with captions added. And if you ensure you keep your language clear and simple, this will make it more accessible for more users. And again, as we've said before, check your color contrasts. If you're putting text or infographics on screen, ensure that you don't have white text on a pale background.
See, I knew you were going to ask that question.
Do you know if you can edit the captions?
When uploading content to the YouTube app, YouTube will automatically add captions for you. It is important, however, to check those captions to ensure they're accurate and it hasn't picked up any strange anomalies with your accent. The WCAG standard is to have your closed captions turned off on videos so that users can opt to turn them on. And they're found under this button. If you play your video, you can choose to turn on your captions. There's a number of accessibility tools built in to help with your requirements. For example, under the Home menu, there's a dictate function. This will allow you to turn speed. You can turn them on or off as you like. If you do need to edit them, in the channel content section of the website, you need to select subtitles and then select the video that you would like to edit. You can then choose the language and edit these subtitles. Here you can see a full transcript of the video I've created, and I can go in and correct any small changes before I publish that draft.
So these are tiny things that we can do. Yes?
Just a question on the alt text. I don't know if you're planning to cover that off in terms of how descriptive you should be, because I struggle a little bit with that in terms of particularly, I know sometimes they say, is it decorative or is it, you know,
Absolutely.
It's quite hard to look at an image and kind of go, what in this image is useful to communicate?
So the key that I use that I think is what I've seen in a number of different blogs and recommendations is that it's not necessarily about the photo, but rather the intent behind the photo. So you're quite right. If it is a purely decorative image that adds nothing to somebody's experience of your website, there's nothing in that they really need to understand, you've got a pretty little swoosh or a starburst in the corner, then the alt text, you would just leave that blank, or you could put in decorative image. You don't need to provide any additional information for that. However, if you've got a photo of your B&B on a website and you specifically want people to know that that's what it is, then you go in and you put the intent. People probably don't need to know that it's a blue sky with clouds and a rainbow behind a small cottage with a courtyard and 5 bushes, and you can fill it up too much. And I think there might be a restriction on the number of characters. So if you know the intent behind the usage of that image, try closing your eyes and going, what do I actually want people to think or feel when they see or when they hear the description of this? So for me, in that situation, something that says, image of cottage after a rainstorm with a rainbow would probably be all I need to include there in terms of a descriptive alt text. It's to give somebody who can't see the image clearly an indication of the feel and the intent behind your image choice.
I have a vision impairment, not full, I mean I'm not legally blind, but I have images off in my emails all the time, and I still want every image labelled so I know whether there's content I'm missing or not. So if it's like when one of the supermarket chains sending out a mailer and it had a whole page of blank squares, and I fed back to them, do they not want disabled customers? Please put at least a one line, like something rather sausages, whatever, so I knew what it was. And within 3 weeks, then working with their comms team, they did that, and now every mailer I get from that supermarket chain now says what is in those images, and it's just enough information.
The power of feedback, the power of talking. Yes, sir.
With captions, particularly on dodgy Zoom and things like that, and you often miss quite a bit of what people are saying, will the captions still show up actually what they are saying?
It shows up what the algorithm has heard and what the microphone has heard. If you've got a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting where it's recorded the captions, somebody within the organisation, potentially the host, can go in and edit it to correct it before they provide it to people who were attendees of that event. So yeah, I know that.
So the image can be dodgy, but the actual recordings of it, you should still get what the original intent of the caption was.
Absolutely.
But you'll nearly always have to translate to Reo because the tools are not
designed for, absolutely. And they're getting there. So Te Reo Māori is a language that is in development in a lot of organisations and in a lot of language transferable translating products. I know that it's coming on, what's the fun one that everyone does on the bus where they're learning their French? What's the one, the app? That's it, Duolingo. Duolingo is bringing Te Reo Māori, which is going to be awesome because that's going to improve my ability to speak it. And I think it is one of the ones that is coming with Microsoft. So yeah, talking about quick digital checks, these are the things that, in terms of checking your images for alt text, in terms of things that you can do yourselves. You don't need to have any requirements or special needs to be able to go in and check these things on any of your digital products. So the recommendation is unplug your mouse. This is such a fun game to play. This is like, I've watched developers' brains break when they realize they've built a website that's completely inaccessible because it doesn't have a proper tab function. So people who have mobility issues, instead of using a mouse, will often just tab through a website by pushing on the one button. And you should be able to go from the initial loading of your page all the way through the key elements on your page. Anything that you need to interact with, the tab function should sit on that element and give you the option to either dig deeper if it's a button or a list or a menu, or highlight it so you can see where you are on the page. And when you unplug your mouse, as someone who regularly just zooms around and then try to work through any of your websites, it's so enlightening to where the errors and bug fixes need to come in. Another thing you can do is try zooming in your website or your page or your app to about 400%. Now this is, 400% is, I think, the maximum allowance that you have to have according to the WCAG guide. And it basically converts anything on a desktop to more like a mobile view if your product is developed correctly. Otherwise, text breaks, words break in weird places in the middle, you get half images, things go very, very long, and you suddenly have a web page that's 3 miles wide and you were unaware that that's where all the content has gone. So zooming in to test these things is really awesome. I had a web developer the other day tell me that it's not required. Nobody needs that. So he's going to get a beating when I get back to the office. Because it really is required. I've got a colleague at work who literally needs to have her screen. She's, again, does not consider herself disabled. She has reading glasses to help her with anything that she needs to do on screen, and she needs to have her screen zoomed into this level to be able to read things, and we have internal systems that just break and cannot do it, so she can't use them. Turning your images off, you said that yourself. Again, if anyone's interested in how to do this, you can, in Google Chrome, go in and fiddle with your settings and turn off images so that you can see what your website looks like if those images aren't there. And that's a great way to test your alt text. If that image no longer shows up as a pretty picture, what do you get instead? Do you get anything instead? Does it have a title? Does it have alt text? Does it work? Is it what you intended your audience to be able to see? And using a contrast checker. Contrast checkers are awesome. This is where, if good designers used their contrast checkers, we wouldn't get white text on a yellow background. And any designer, again, I've worked with a few who've turned around and said to me, oh, I'm more focused on usability than accessibility. They're missing the point. There is no usability without accessibility. So if your designer can't stretch their brain to do this, you have my permission to tell them they're a bad designer and I'll have words. Because the whole challenge of design and creating accessible products that look good and are enjoyable to use, a lot of that actually falls to the designer, and their creative brains should be able to come up with ways to make it work for everyone.
Effectiveness. I mean, I don't know if you all know about Nano Girl, Michelle Dickinson, who's a professional science communicator, world-famous scientist. She says before doing a presentation that's going to be a YouTube video, she records it, tests it, and she turns off vision. So does it sound? Can she follow it just by hearing it? She'll turn off sound and do it. Can she follow it just visually? So she check it 3 times. Does it make sense each way? And she does that before she publishes the content. And because of that testing, her delivery captures far more content for people to understand. There's different learning modes as well. Some people are visual, some are auditory, you know. Check it both ways.
Absolutely. And the W3C provide a test, it's sort of like preliminary easy tests that you can run on your website. So I've talked about a few of my favorites, but they have a full list of these on at that URL. Again, this will all be provided. Please don't feel like you need to furiously scribble, because I'm guaranteed to push the button when you're halfway through that URL. I'm watching to make sure pens have stopped moving. So I recently attended Ali Bytes event. It was an online conference for accessibility, and they had a lovely presenter who came to talk about his experience as being part of the neurodiverse community. And I had no idea how the difference in the tools that people can provided to use in the office can make such an enormous difference to their actual experience doing their jobs. And he said he can't use Microsoft Word, for example, to create a document, because there are so many things on the top menu bar of the tool and what he can potentially do, that it's just so exciting. It's like a candy shop. And he starts clicking on buttons and finding he can do things, and he goes down inside menus and he gets completely lost, and 45 minutes later he kind of goes, what was I supposed to be doing again? And he's got no memory of the task that he actually sat down to try and start. And he recommended Google as a really great set of applications that have far less in terms of visual interruptions on the screen, and recommended them to use as an alternative. I think the key here is kind of talking to your users, your employees. If anyone needs different requirements or different software, finding out what works for them and providing them with a solution that makes them the most efficient is how you get the most out of everyone. I've got a little video here on the Chrome tools in the developer section of their website. It's a little bit more technical. Please ask me a million questions about this if it doesn't make sense. I tried to keep it real simple, but I also understand that devs are a weird bunch. So if anything that I've said is a little bit too complicated, just ask. I can't add them, sorry.
There are lots of ways that Google Chrome can help you test your accessibility. If we use the Trade Me website as an example, and we write, there are lots of ways that Google Chrome...
Just had a thought. Maybe if I don't run the speech on the video and talk it to it instead, would that be easier?
It's fine, you can run a video.
But this is embedded in the presentation. It's all good.
No, I mean, this is not an interactive screen. This is video that Bev was presenting, so it wouldn't have the link to the original.
There are lots of ways.
before that video, which have a CC button.
Right, let's see if this works.
That Google Chrome can help you test your accessibility. If we use the Trade Me website as an example, and we right-click and select this Inspect option from the menu, it opens up what's referred to as developer tools. Don't worry about the code, none of that's particularly important right now. Up here, we've got a small icon, which looks like a box with an arrow in the corner. If we select that, it allows us to check individual elements on our page, and we'll get accessibility information about these. For example, we see that this element is called My Trade Me, and it has the role of a link. A link is just something that takes you to another part of the web page. We also can see that it is keyboard focusable. This means that if somebody is using a screen reader, they can select that piece to get further information.
Or tab onto it.
We've also got information about the font that's used, the size, and the colour. The little blue square indicates the colour of the font that they have used, and the number after it is what's referred to as a hex code, which is just computer language for the colour. This shows us that each of these elements has passing colour contrast. The blue on the white background is a good enough contrast for people with low vision to be able to see the difference. However, the website also has a few failing contrast issues. So for example, the time and the date, this piece of grey text on the white background, doesn't provide enough contrast for those with low vision. Whilst you might need technical knowledge to be able to fix these, knowing where your issues are on your website allows you to go back to your developers and know exactly where the problems are that you're hoping to fix. Another great built-in tool of Chrome is something called Lighthouse. So under these two arrows, there are some options for a few additional tools, and Lighthouse is built into the newest version of Chrome. If we select that, we get the opportunity to generate a report on any particular page. We can select a bunch of different categories and whether or not a user would be using our site on a mobile or a desktop option. When we click report, generate report, it goes off to check all that information for us, and we don't need to do anything. It will compare our website to the current WCAG guidelines and let us know where any of the issues are. In a perfect world, you'd want your score for accessibility to be above 90. But right now, what we've got is a pretty good score and a bunch of places where we can make improvements. For example, there's a few images on this page that don't contain alt text. There's a few buttons on this page that don't have accessible naming. If we know these things, we know where the issues are and whether they can be corrected. Obviously, one of the best ways of using Chrome is just to search the web for lots of more information. So if you wanted to test the colour contrast on your website and you found that you had some failing elements, you can open up a Chrome page, search colour contrast checker, and you'll get about 500,000 options of where you can check that. One of my favourites is contrastratio.com because it's really simple. You don't need any special knowledge to understand it, you just need those hex code colour names that we were talking about earlier. And it will show you whether you have a passing colour code or a failing colour code. This gives you the opportunity to put in different numbers so you can check and find one that works best for your users.
I love checking colour contrast.
There are lots of ways that Google...
yeah, there's just so many tools and there's lots of things. I think half the battle with all of these tools is actually just knowing that they're there. I was going to just talk about a few additional tools that you can use for your process. Some of them I actually learnt about at a different Community Comms Collective event, which was very helpful. And this is why I think, you know, talking about it, knowing, sharing what you know, sharing the tools that you like to use and the things that you prefer is really great, because somebody else who's got a similar interest will go, oh yeah, but I like this one because it does that. And you can find out about a whole bunch of additional things that you didn't know about.
So Bev, the tool that you were referring to the previous 2 slides back, that was Lighthouse. Now, is that a Google Chrome extension, or what is...
It is built in. It is not an extension. You don't need to add it. It is now there. I had an issue at work the other day where I could not get my Google...
So you find it in settings? Where would people find Lighthouse?
It's in your... You go to your dev tools, you open up that inspect menu, and then there's a couple of little arrows at the top which tell you that there's more tools hidden under those dev tools, and you can select it from that list. It's not an extension, but if you go looking for it and you can't find it, like I did the other day at work, when you open up a browser window, there's 3 little dots in the top right-hand corner of the website. If your Google version, your Chrome version, isn't the most recent, it won't find Lighthouse. So you just need to run a little update, and that will automatically install it, and it is then there for you to use. There are a bunch of additional extensions and additional tools that you can get. Some of these bookmarklets and Axe are extensions, and I can talk about those a little bit as I go through. And the reason I say, so Axe is another automated checker, and it's another free extension that you can get and run. It's a little bit more technical. It provides the error information in a little bit more detail, but I recently found out that automated checking generally only hits about 30% at best of your accessibility issues. So running multiple tools across the same site, you'll pick up more issues. And one of the things that I really like about Axe is that you can look at a thing and go, it's highlighting a picture that doesn't have alt text, for example. And you can tell Axe that actually, yeah, it's because it's a decorative image and you want it to have an empty value, and you leave that image with no alt text, and you can tell Axe to not check that again. So it will improve its search functionality on how you're using it when you tell it that you've checked certain things. Because the great thing about a lot of these guidelines is, whilst they exist to make everyone's experience better, they're actually not hard and fast rules that apply to every single element. And often going in and checking a guideline and going, yeah, it doesn't quite meet where it's supposed to be, but there's a reason for that. It's because we have these other 3 things in place that help to support that one thing. You can then cancel it and ignore that element of the accessibility. So although it's not passing, you've got other mechanisms to make sure that you're still meeting the standard that you need to. Hemingway app is a really, really awesome free tool. It's a website. If you type in Hemingway app, it'll come up. And it's a great way to make sure that your English stays at an understandable level. It will tell you whether you're using passive text. It will tell you if you're writing at a postgraduate level and nobody else in your organization is going to be able to understand what you're talking about. And with a few quick changes, you can adjust your reading level to around about age 15, which is the recommended age range to be advertising in New Zealand. Bookmarklets. I have a list. Yes, sorry.
Sorry, 13.
13.
The standard for most newspapers, but for general level of reading.
I stand corrected. Thank you. 13. Even better. I again went to a Hui where I was provided with a list of tiny little apps that you can run on your webpage. You install them like a Google extension, and they live there, and you can just turn them on to check certain things and turn them off again. Again, a little bit more technical. It starts looking at the code of your website and highlighting where you've got some issues. But if you're looking to find these issues, if you're looking to do a brand refresh or change up your website, it's a really awesome thing to have. And most important thing that I keep going on about, I've probably said it 12 times already, is your voice. If there is an issue with your mailer from your supermarket, ring them and tell them it's broken and it doesn't work. If you're using a website and you can't find the thing you need, call their customer service and tell them it's broken. If you look for a link and the link isn't connected to the document that's supposed to be on the other end, find the person who's responsible for that and make them fix it, please.
Long conversations. We're having to explain to Auckland Council's communication chair a couple of years back about why photographing and image scanning results from an election and sending it out as PDF results was not acceptable practice, because people who are blind cannot get information from a photocopy of an image.
Oh,
It is
no.
a totally blank thing. And that was and the person on the communications end did not understand my short thing. So I had to share the link to Blind and Low Vision New Zealand about what an accessible document is, and I, by that stage, then started cutting and pasting for the next 10 discussions with government agencies about why PDFs are bad.
They are. We know this.
It's like, it's really good if you get that feedback, because it makes it so much easier for the next person, so you don't have to do it every time, you know.
So this is I think my last little video, just explaining some of those tools that I was talking about.
Another great tool that I discovered at a community collective
Repeating myself.
workshop is the Hemingway app editor. This is a free editor online that will help you keep your English in check. Here is the bio used for the presentation of this workshop. You can see that we have one adverb, which is potentially unneeded, one word that has a simpler phrase alternative, and a couple of hard sentences. With a couple of really easy changes, we've now reduced the reading age to a grade 7. As a general rule, when writing text for the general
13.
public, we should try and
13.
keep our reading age at around about age 15.
Not 15.
That way it's accessible to the most people possible. One of my favourite online resources is Deek University. These guys offer courses in accessibility, and they also have a section on their website of some really awesome videos and tutorials on accessibility and great top tips on how to use these things. They also have a really good contrast analyzer that we looked at earlier. One of the final tools I use when I'm auditing a website is something called bookmarklets. This very black and white website provides you with a link of different pages, a list of different pages that you can go in and check the accessibility. These would probably require a little bit more technical knowledge, but some of them are really easy to understand when you know what you're looking for. So if I open up one of those bookmarklets that will, for example, check headings, what it does is run a check across your page and make sure that you have an appropriate heading level for each of the elements on your page. Ideally, your headings should be in numerical order and should go up in number the smaller the heading gets. So there should only ever be one H1 on a page. That is the main header and the main information for that web page. Next, there would be H2s, and you could have a couple of those, but you wouldn't have an H3 unless you'd had an H2. And these bookmarklets have a really easy way of showing that up and letting you check it without any additional developer input. There are other ones in that selection that you can use. They're a little bit more complicated, but if you want to dig in further to the accessibility requirements of your site, I would highly recommend having a play.
So my proposed solution, yes. I just think that if we're producing inaccessible documents, we're producing broken documents. We're not producing things that actually work. And the best thing that we can possibly do is to care. We need to actually care and give a damn about these broken things to get them fixed. You don't need to be a developer. You don't need to have specialist knowledge. What you need is to talk about it, share it, and make the people in your organisations listen. And I know I'm talking as a lowly worker in a government organisations, and I'm hoping all of your wonderful charities and not-for-profits are much better and much nimbler and quicker to change. But yeah, just let's talk about it. Go. So I'm going to send you all away with homework. I love it when I go to a workshop and they give me homework. It's great fun. Hopefully none of these things seem too onerous. The steps that I would recommend after leaving here is to talk about it. Go back and grab a coffee with your colleagues and talk about it and tell them about this crazy woman at the front of the stage that was waffling on using crappy videos. Stay curious. I learn so much accessibility by actually asking people about their experiences and by listening to what they have to say. The God's honest truth is the first steps that you make to try and improve your accessibility are probably going to be disastrous. You may make it worse before you make it better, but you're actually for a group of people that have been so ignored for so long that it's really about more than time that we change this. I was recently got a lovely anecdote from someone who was telling me that people in wheelchairs quite often will not search for hotels for a roll-in shower because they just don't expect them to exist. So knowing your audience and knowing that what they search for to find the solutions they need is a really key step. So instead, if it has, ground level access, if it has ramps instead of elevators, they have the understanding that actually this is a place that I could stay that is considering me. I might actually be able to get other facilities at this place that will work for me because, they've never found a roll-in shower. So if we can start creating tiny little things that work for our audiences, that work for our users, we're on the road to getting better. The WCAG standards are only going to get tighter, and the tiny things that we do today are going to really help in the long term improving the accessibility needs so that when it becomes mandated for every organisation, we don't all suddenly go, oh crap, where do we start? So baby steps.